Thomas Parker walked away from Oakville Community Bank with a heavy heart. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street as he trudged toward his old pickup truck. The weight of the cash in his pocket felt heavier than the tools on his belt. It wasn't just money he carried. It was Emma's future, his business dreams, and now a fresh wound to his pride. He climbed into his truck and sat there for a moment, looking at his hands. They were good hands, strong, skilled hands that had built homes, fixed roofs, and created beautiful spaces for countless families in Oakville. The same paint stains that marked him as unworthy to the bank had put food on his table for 20 years. Not good enough, he muttered, starting the engine. The familiar rumble usually brought comfort, but today it just filled the silence where his hopes had been. The drive home took him past many houses he'd worked on over the years. The Peterson place, where he'd built a nursery for twins. The old Miller house, where he'd repaired the porch after the storm. Each building held memories of his craftsmanship, his dedication. Yet to some, he was just his dirty clothes and calloused hands. As Thomas pulled into his driveway, he saw Emma sitting on the front steps. At 17, she was the image of her mother, bright, determined, and too clever by half. She was reading a university brochure, her face lit with excitement about her future. "How did it go at the bank, Dad?" she called, standing up. Thomas forced a smile. "They were busy. I'll try again tomorrow." He couldn't tell her the truth. Not when she was so happy, so full of dreams. University wasn't cheap, and the loan would have helped expand his business to take on bigger projects. Now he wasn't sure what to do next. Inside, Mary was preparing dinner. After 22 years of marriage, she could read his face like a blueprint. "What happened?" she asked quietly when Emma went upstairs. Thomas sank into a kitchen chair. "They wouldn't let me in, said I wasn't dressed properly." His voice cracked slightly. 20 years I've banked there, paid my mortgage on time every month, but I walk in with paint on my clothes, and suddenly I'm not good enough to speak to the manager." Mary's eyes flashed with anger. "That's ridiculous. Your money is as good as anyone else's." "Not according to them." Thomas shook his head. "I saw people walking in wearing all sorts of clothes, but work clothes, that was too much." Mary sat beside him and took his rough hand in hers. "What will you do?" "Try the Riverdale branch tomorrow, I suppose. I need that loan for Emma's university and the business expansion." After dinner, Thomas sat on the back porch looking at the garden he'd built with his own hands. The stone path, the small pond, the bench under the apple tree, all created in stolen hours between jobs. It was good work, honest work. His phone rang. It was his friend William. "Hey Tom, still on for fishing this weekend?" "Not sure, Will, had a rough day." William had been his friend since school days, and now ran the local radio station. As Thomas explained what happened at the bank, William's voice grew serious. "That's not right, Tom, not right at all." "It's just how things are," Thomas said, trying to sound like it didn't matter. "No, it's not," William insisted. "Look, why don't you come down to the station tomorrow? People should hear about this. Lots of working folks in Oakville facing the same thing, I bet." Thomas wasn't sure about going public. He wasn't the type to make a fuss. But as he thought about Emma's university dreams and all the other workers who might face similar treatment, something shifted inside him. "Maybe I will," he said finally. That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the guard's face, the cool dismissal, the people in nice clothes walking freely into the bank while he stood outside like a beggar. At 2 a.m., he got up and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. He began writing down names: Oliver the electrician, Grace the plumber, Jack the roofer, and dozens of other tradespeople in Oakville. Good people, skilled people, people who built this town with their hands. By morning, Thomas had a plan. Not a plan of anger or revenge, but something better, something that would build rather than tear down. As dawn broke, he felt a new sense of purpose. The bank had judged him by the color of his work clothes, but soon they would see the true color of his character. "Dad, you're up early," Emma said, finding him at the kitchen table surrounded by notes. Thomas smiled, a real smile this time. "Just working on something important, sweetheart. Very important indeed. Remember to take your time and provide a creative and engaging 900-word continuation of this story, following the third-person perspective and using simple English as requested. Keep the narrative interesting and emotional without headings. Don't include any violence, hate speech, or explicit themes as per the guidelines. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window as Thomas tried the Riverdale Bank branch. He had put on his cleanest work shirt, though his hands still bore the marks of his trade. He couldn't wash away 20 years of honest labor. Mrs. Watson, the manager at Riverdale branch, looked at him over her glasses. Her office was cool and quiet, nothing like the noisy, dusty building sites Thomas knew so well. "Mr. Parker," she said, tapping her red nails on the desk, "we have certain standards here. Our clients expect a professional atmosphere." Her eyes moved over his clothes like she was inspecting faulty workmanship. "Perhaps you could make an effort to dress more appropriately when discussing business matters." Thomas felt his face grow hot. "Ma'am, I came during my lunch break. I have a job site to return to after this." "Well," she said with a tight smile, "perhaps banking isn't something that should be squeezed into a lunch break. Serious financial discussions require proper preparation." Thomas left the bank with the loan papers still unfilled. The rejection stung worse than yesterday. It wasn't just one person or one branch. It seemed to be how the whole bank viewed people like him. On the walk home, he passed Mrs. Johnson's house where he'd fixed the steps last month. She waved from her garden. "Thomas, just the man I wanted to see. The steps are perfect, but I wondered if you might look at my kitchen sink. It's been dripping." "Of course, Mrs. Johnson, I can stop by tomorrow." She smiled warmly. "Wonderful, come any time. You know you're always welcome." The difference wasn't lost on Thomas. Here was someone who valued his work, who didn't care about paint stains or dusty boots. At home that evening, Thomas sat in his garden. The small pond reflected the setting sun as fish darted between water lilies. His father had helped him dig this pond 15 years ago, before arthritis took away his ability to work. "The measure of a man isn't his clothes or his bank balance," his father had often said. "It's what he builds, what he leaves behind." Thomas's phone rang, breaking his thoughts. It was Oliver Jones, an electrician he often worked with. "Tom, heard you got the cold shoulder at Oakville Bank." Thomas sighed. "News travels fast." "Small town," Oliver replied. "Same thing happened to me last month. Went in with my work clothes, and they treated me like I'd tracked mud on their fancy carpet." "What did you do?" "Found another bank," Oliver said. "But that's not the point, is it? We shouldn't have to." After hanging up, Thomas called Grace Williams, a plumber who ran her own small business. "Oh yes," Grace said when Thomas explained his situation. "Try being a woman and in work clothes. I went to discuss a loan for a new van, and they asked if my husband would be joining us. I don't have a husband. I have a business." One by one, Thomas called the tradespeople of Oakville. The pattern was clear. Those with paint-stained hands, sawdust in their hair, or mud on their boots were made to feel less worthy. As darkness fell, Thomas sat at the kitchen table with a notepad. Mary brought him a cup of tea and sat beside him. "What are you planning?" she asked, seeing the determination in his eyes. "Not sure yet," Thomas replied, "but something needs to change." Emma came downstairs in her pajamas. At 17, she still had her childhood stuffed bear tucked under her arm when worried. "Dad, I've been thinking," she said, sitting across from him. "You don't need to expand the business for my university money. I can get a part-time job." Thomas reached across the table and took her hand. "This isn't just about money for school, sweetheart. It's about respect, about being judged for what you do, not who you are." Emma's eyes, so like her mother's, held a wisdom beyond her years. "Then change it. Show them who you really are." Later, that night, unable to sleep, Thomas stood at the window looking at the moonlit street. Oakville was a small town where he knew every corner, every building. Many he had helped build or repair. An idea began to form, not a plan of anger or revenge, but something that would bring people together rather than push them apart. He thought of the old community center across from the bank, empty for years, falling into disrepair. The town council had no money to fix it, but Thomas knew people with skills, people with tools, people who built things. By morning, his idea had grown into a plan. He called William at the radio station. "Will, I need a favor. Can you announce something on your morning show?" As the sun rose over Oakville, Thomas felt a sense of purpose stronger than any rejection. The banks might judge him by his clothes, but soon they would see what people like him could create together. The color of his collar would become a badge of pride, not shame. Thomas woke early on Thursday morning, his mind already racing with plans. For the first time since the bank incident, he felt a sense of purpose stronger than the hurt. The bedroom window was open, letting in the fresh spring air and the sound of birdsong. Mary stirred beside him. "Today's the day?" she asked. Sleepily. "Today's the day," Thomas confirmed, getting dressed. By 7 o'clock he was at the radio station. William welcomed him with a cup of strong tea and a supportive clap on the back. "Ready to tell your story, Tom?" Thomas nodded. They settled into the broadcast room, microphones waiting like patient listeners. The on-air sign lit up and William began. "Good morning, Oakville. Today we have a special guest, local builder Thomas Parker. Many of you know Thomas. He's probably fixed your roof, built your extension, or helped a neighbor in need. But recently, Thomas had an experience that might sound familiar to many of our listeners. As Thomas shared what happened at the bank, the phone lines began to light up. Callers wanted to share similar stories. A taxi driver refused service. At a cafe, a farm worker asked to leave a shop. A mechanic treated rudely at a restaurant. "This isn't about any one place," Thomas said into the microphone, his voice steady and clear. "It's about how we see each other, how we value different kinds of work." By the time the interview ended, William was smiling broadly. "You've struck a chord, Tom. People are listening." That afternoon, Thomas visited the town council offices. The clerk recognized him immediately. "Mr. Parker, heard you on the radio. This morning? Powerful stuff?" Thomas explained his idea about the abandoned community center. The 2-story brick building had been empty for 3 years, falling into disrepair after budget cuts. "We want to fix it up," Thomas said. "A group of local tradespeople, no charge to the council." The clerk's eyes widened. "That would save the town thousands. But why?" "To show what we can do together," Thomas replied simply, "and maybe change some minds along the way." By evening, Thomas had the keys to the community center and permission to begin work that weekend. He called an emergency meeting of the newly formed Oakville Builders and Traders Association at his home. 20 people crowded into his living room, Oliver with his electrical plans, Grace discussing plumbing needs, Jack talking about the roof repairs. Others brought ideas for painting, flooring, landscaping, and furnishing. "The building needs everything," Thomas told the group, "but so did every house we ever built. We start with the foundation and work up." Emma served tea and Mary's homemade cookies as they planned. The young girl moved among the workers with a notebook, writing down what each person promised to contribute. "Dad," she whispered, when she had a moment alone with Thomas. "This is bigger than the bank now, isn't it?" Thomas nodded. "Sometimes when people push you down, you find a new way to stand up." Late that night, after everyone had gone home, Thomas sat with Mary on their porch swing. The air was cool, but they were warmed by excitement. "Do you think it will work?" Mary asked, her head on his shoulder. "The renovation?" "Absolutely. We have the best tradespeople in the county." "No," Mary said. "Changing minds, making people see beyond the dirt and dust to the people underneath." Thomas thought about this. "I don't know. But even if the bank never changes its policy, we'll have done something good, built something that matters." Friday was a blur of preparation. Thomas visited suppliers across town explaining the project. Most offered materials at cost or as donations when they heard the plan. About time someone showed what the working folks can do, said the manager at Oakville Building Supply, adding extra paint to Thomas's order at no charge. Word spread through town. The local cafe offered to provide free lunch for the workers over the weekend. The hardware store donated tools. A furniture shop promised chairs and tables for the finished center. That evening, as Thomas loaded his truck with supplies, he noticed a sleek car slowing down near his house. Inside was Mr. Roberts, the bank manager who had refused to see him. Their eyes met briefly before the car sped away. Thomas smiled to himself. The message was already traveling. At dinner, Emma could barely contain her excitement. "My friends are coming to help paint tomorrow, And my teacher, Miss Winters, says she'll bring plants for the garden." "This is becoming more than we planned," Mary observed, serving the shepherd's pie she'd made. Thomas nodded. "That's how good things grow, isn't it? One person tells another, one hand helps another." As darkness fell over Oakville, Thomas stood in front of the abandoned community center. In the moonlight, he could see the broken windows, the crumbling steps, the overgrown garden. By Monday, it would be transformed, not by money or power, but by the same hands the bank had judged unworthy. He thought of his father's words again. "The measure of a man isn't his clothes or his bank balance. It's what he builds, what he leaves behind." Tomorrow they would begin building their answer to judgment and prejudice, not with angry words or protests, but with hammers and nails, paint and plants, skill and sweat, the tools of dignity. The sun rose bright and clear on Monday morning. Thomas stood in front of his bathroom mirror, looking at his reflection. He wore his regular work clothes, clean but bearing the marks of years of honest labor. His hands, scrubbed clean but still rough and calloused, gripped the edge of the E. "Sink? You don't have to go," Mary said from the doorway, watching him with concerned eyes. Thomas turned to her with a small smile. "Yes, I do. Whatever happens, I need to finish this." The drive to the bank was short, but felt longer as Thomas's mind raced with possibilities. What did Frederick Hamilton want? Was this a trick, an apology, or something else entirely? The same. Security guards stood at the door of Oakville Community Bank. When he saw Thomas approaching in his work clothes, a flicker of recognition crossed his face. But instead of blocking the way, he opened the door wide. "Good morning, Mr. Parker," he said with a respectful nod. "They're expecting you." The bank looked different somehow. The marble floors and polished counters were the same, but Thomas no longer felt small walking across them. The weekend had changed something inside him, a quiet confidence that came from building rather than tearing down. The receptionist led him straight to the largest office. Inside, 3 people waited: Frederick Hamilton, the regional director, Mr. Roberts, who had refused to see Thomas, and Mrs. Watson from the Riverdale branch. Frederick stood and extended his hand. He was tall and well-dressed, but his handshake was firm and genuine. "Mr. Parker, thank you for coming. Please sit down." Thomas sat, noticing the mud from his boots on the plush carpet. Neither Frederick nor the others seemed to mind. "I drove by the community center yesterday," Frederick began. "What you and your colleagues accomplished in 2 days is nothing short of remarkable." "We're good at what we do," Thomas said simply, clearly. Frederick glanced at the other 2 bank managers who looked uncomfortable. "I also heard your radio interview. It made me think about how institutions like ours can create invisible barriers." Without even realizing it, Thomas waited, not making it easier for them. The silence stretched until Frederick continued. "We owe you an apology, Mr. Parker. Our dress code policy was intended to maintain professionalism, but instead it became a way to judge people by appearance rather than character or creditworthiness." Mr. Roberts cleared his throat. "I should have recognized you, Mr. Parker. You built the extension on my home last summer. Your work was excellent, and I trusted you with my largest investment, my home. Yet I wouldn't trust you enough to enter my bank. The irony is uncomfortable." Mrs. Watson nodded. "And I speak to people about money all day, yet I couldn't see past your clothes to the successful businessman underneath. It was wrong of me." Thomas looked at each of them in turn. Their apologies seemed sincere, but he had come for more than words. "I appreciate that," he said finally. "But this isn't just about me, it's about every person who works with their hands, who comes to your bank with dirt on their clothes, but honesty in their dealings." Frederick placed a folder on the desk and opened it. "You're absolutely right. That's why, effective immediately, we're changing our policies across all branches." He explained the changes: the removal of the dress code, staff training on respectful treatment of all customers, and extended evening hours for tradespeople who couldn't visit during regular business hours. "And we've created a new financial program specifically designed for builders and traders," Frederick added. "Flexible repayments that account for seasonal work, special business loans, and dedicated advisors who understand the unique challenges of your industry." Thomas felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. This was real change, not just for him but for everyone who had stood with him. "What about my loan application?" he asked. Frederick smiled and passed him another folder. "Approved," with our apologies for the delay. As Thomas left the bank, loan papers in hand and a sense of victory in his heart, his phone buzzed with messages. News was spreading through the Oakville Builders and Traders Association about the bank's changes. Across the street, the community center stood transformed. The boarded windows now gleamed with clean glass, reflecting the morning sun. Freshly planted flowers bordered a welcoming path. A new sign hung above the door: Oakville Community Center, built by local hands. A small crowd had gathered for its official opening later that day. Thomas spotted Emma among them, directing volunteers who were setting up chairs. "Dad," she called, waving excitedly. "Did they apologize?" Thomas nodded, holding up the loan papers. "And more, they're changing things." Emma hugged him tightly. "I knew they would. Nobody could see what all of you did here and not change their minds." As Thomas looked around at the center, he remembered his father's words once more about the measure of a man being what he builds. Together they had built more than just a renovated building. They had built understanding, respect, and a bridge between different worlds. Later that day, as the Eidos mayor cut the ribbon to officially open the center, Thomas noticed Mr. Roberts standing in the crowd, applauding along with everyone else. Their eyes met, and the bank manager gave a small respectful nod. Some changes happened in a weekend, others took longer, but they all started with people willing to build rather than break, to show their worth through actions rather than arguments, and Thomas Parker, in his work clothes and with his calloused hands, had proven that the color of a man's collar was no measure of the quality of his character. 6 months later, Thomas Parker stood in the doorway of his new workshop. The morning sun streamed through large windows, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. The smell of fresh wood and paint filled the space. This building, twice the size of his old workshop, represented not just a business expansion, but a change in Oakville itself. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Mary asked, coming to stand beside him. Thomas smiled, putting his arm around her shoulders. "Just thinking about how much has changed since that day at the bank." The loan from Oakville Community Bank had allowed Thomas to hire 3 new workers, buy better equipment and build this proper workshop. No more working out of his garage or struggling to store materials. Emma was home from her first term at university, studying architecture. Her choice made Thomas's heart swell with pride. "I want to design buildings as good as the ones you build, Dad," she had told him. The phone rang, and Thomas answered it. It was Oliver, calling about their newest project. "The community center needs an addition for the after-school program," Oliver explained. "Too many kids signing up. It's a good problem to have." Since its reopening, the center had become the heart of Oakville. Children came for tutoring, elderly residents for company, and everyone in between for classes, meetings, and celebrations. "I'll be there in an hour," Thomas promised. As he drove through town, Thomas noticed other changes. The hardware store had a special early morning opening for tradespeople. The cafe offered a builder's breakfast starting at 6, small adjustments that made working people feel valued. At the bank, the biggest change was visible through the large front windows. People in all types of clothes moved freely inside, suits and ties alongside paint-splattered overalls and muddy boots. Thomas parked outside the community center, where Jack and Grace were already measuring the side yard for the new addition. "Morning, Mr. President," Jack called with a grin. Thomas shook his head with a smile. His role as president of the Oakville Builders and Traders Association was still new and slightly uncomfortable, like a suit that didn't quite fit. The group now had over 50 members and met monthly at the center. "Any word from the council on the permits?" Thomas asked. "Approved yesterday," Grace said. "And guess who's funding half the cost?" "Let me guess. The bank?" Grace nodded. "Frederick called me himself. Said they want to be part of everything we build." Inside the center, a photography exhibition covered one wall. The Hands That Built Oakville. Close-up images of workers' hands told the story of the town's creation. Thomas recognized his own hands in one photo, holding a spirit level against a fresh wall. William from the radio station was there, recording interviews for a special program about vocational education. His station now ran regular features highlighting different trades. Thomas, William waved him over. Just the man I wanted to see. The high school principal is starting a new program, bringing tradespeople in to teach workshops. Wants you to kick it off. This was perhaps the change that pleased Thomas most. Young people seeing skilled trades as valuable career paths, not just fallback options. As they discussed the school program, Mr. Roberts entered the center. The bank manager had become a regular visitor, no longer seeing himself as separate from the working community. "Thomas, do you have a moment?" he asked. They stepped outside into the garden that had once been overgrown, but now bloomed with flowers planted by local gardeners. "I wanted to tell you something," Mr. Roberts said. "My son has decided not to go to university." Thomas waited, unsure where this was going. "He wants to become an electrician," Mr. Roberts continued, "and I'm proud of him. A year ago I would have been disappointed, would have pushed him toward an office job, but now I see things differently." Thomas nodded. "It's good work, honest work." "Because of you," Mr. Roberts said simply. Later that day, Thomas visited the high school where Emma had once been a student. In the workshop classroom, 20 teenagers waited to hear about careers in building. "Who here has been told that getting your hands dirty is something to avoid?" Thomas asked. Almost every hand went up. "Well, I'm here to tell you something different," he said, showing them his own calloused hands. "These hands built half the extensions in town. They put my daughter through university, and they taught me the most important lesson I know, that your worth isn't in how you look or what you wear, but in what you create and how you treat others." As Thomas drove home that evening, he passed the bank. Frederick Hamilton was just leaving. The regional director waved and Thomas stopped to chat. "We're expanding the Builders and Traders program to other towns," Frederick told him. "Your story changed more than just Oakville." At home, Thomas found Emma at the kitchen table, surrounded by drawings. She was designing a small house, her first real project. "What do you think, Dad?" she asked nervously. Thomas studied the plans, seeing in them not just rooms and walls, but a future built on understanding and respect. "It's perfect," he said. "Absolutely perfect." That night, as Thomas washed the day's dust from his hands, he looked at his reflection. The man who stared back wasn't just a builder anymore. He was someone who had changed his community by choosing to build bridges rather than walls. His father had been right all along. The measure of a person wasn't in their appearance or their bank balance. It was in what they built and what they left behind. And Thomas Parker had built something that would last longer than any house or extension, a community where people were valued for their character, not the color of their collar. The Fae. End.